Who's Mr. Longfingers, Grandma? She let out a deep breath, as if she wished she hadn't said anything, turned her head back to face me. When she next spoke, she lowered her voice.
I gotta go potty.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Darkling Chronicles. Yes, you will notice I have something on my lip. It is in fact a burnt mole, I know. I had one growing there and I was like, what are you doing? Stop growing. It was relentlessly trying to grow on my lip. So I got the thing burnt off and it's healing really nicely. So it's not a cold sore. No disrespect to anyone who gets one, but I've never had one in my life. So just thought I'd point that out as the elephant in the room, isn't it? Let's be honest. Now, I have such a treat for you guys because this might end up being quite a long episode. But I was on Reddit, okay, which is like my new favourite thing, by the way. I love all of your stories too, don't get me wrong, because I get to actually speak with you. I get to speak with people and I get a really good gauge as to whether I like trust whether it's a real story or not. I've had a few sent to me where I'm like, I don't think that's really 100% accurate. It was way too like ChatGPT'd up, you know. And I get that some people use it for grammar, and I have had a few stories sent to me where they have actually used it for grammar, but they've been really open and honest about that. But other people, I'm like, that was way too poetic. I don't know. Some people might just be better writers than others. I don't know. But I feel like when it's real, it feels real when you read it. Anyway, so I found this person. And they're called No Sleep on Reddit. And what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description so you can go read these stories too. Because like when you know, I really like very rarely find something, especially in like an online forum where I'm just like, oh my God, this is so good. But this person hasn't just shared one story. They've shared 3. Now, the second one, I want you to just bear with, okay? Because it does seem a little far-fetched at the sort of towards the end. But this person feels like a real person. I can't actually say, obviously, 100%. But, you know, it's Reddit. However, the first story and the second story, like, they're just, they're all creepy stories, okay? And do you know what? We'll just have to take them with a pinch of salt if they're real or not. The first one I have to apologise for because you will never, ever want to take a shower ever again. So your family, friends, even your partner could potentially start moaning at you because you stink. But there is always the opportunity to have a hosepipe shower outside during the summer if this story does scare you as much as it scared me. I have just spent about 45 minutes just researching stuff on Reddit and came across these stories and read them. They have captured my attention for that long, actually over that, for about an hour. And I thought, oh my God, I have to share them with my ghost friends. Get comfortable, you know, we're going to get straight into it today. I won't go over any logistics or waffle with you, but I am back from my holiday now. I am back at work. The bubble has been burst. However, I do get to see my work friends on Tuesday, which is really lovely. I can't wait. But it means I'm also back to telling you lot really cool stories. I have got loads of your stories which I will continue to read on here. I know I've been on a bit of a Reddit binge lately, but if it's good and it hits, it's good and it hits, you know. Now, after reading these stories, I can see that they were written by a man called Christopher. So rather than call him by his Reddit name, I'm going to call him Christopher. So Christopher says, my grandma used to tell me scary stories when I was little, and there's one I'll never forget. He says, when I was 10 years old, my grandma came to live with us. It was about 6 months after Grandad had passed away, and I guess looking back, she must have been lonely in that big house of theirs, rattling around with only grief and memories to keep her company. So despite a few protests from my mum, my parents took her in. There were no protests from me, none at all. Grandma was loud and fun, and I loved her. and she had almost a limitless supply of boiled sweets. And she'd always slip me a couple whenever she saw me. She was always the first to stick up for me when I got in trouble too. But it was her stories I loved the best. Grandma had all kinds of stories about growing up in World War II, the stories about the things she'd set up with her friends on the South Coast after her and her family had been evacuated, sad stories, funny stories, and adventure stories. But it was her scary stories that were my favourite. Grandma had lots of scary stories. She told me she had dabbled in the occult when she was a teenager, trying out Ouija boards with her friends and tarot cards and fortune telling and all that stuff. Most of the stories I'd laugh off or forget about not long after she told me, but there were a couple that really did spook me a bit. I was only 10 at the time, you have to understand, and Grandma certainly knew how to bring the stories to life. She'd shut the lights off in my room, so only the glow of the nightlight shone through the curtains, and she'd shuffle in real close. Close enough so I could see the wrinkles on her face and smell the boiled sweets on her breath. Close enough so her deep blue eyes could stare straight into mine. She must have given me nightmares with a few of those tales, but now, years later, there's only one that I can still remember. Only one that stuck with me. The story about the shower and Mr. Longfingers. If anyone just thought anything rude, shame on you. Okay, you're about to get scared. Not the other thing. Grandma told me about Mr. Longfingers one night after I asked her about her baths. Grandma used to love her baths. She'd spent ages in them, light candles and incense, and lie in the tub humming to herself until the water turned cold. It drove my mum crazy. But when I asked her why she loved them so much, she said it's the only place she could relax. It was the only place that she was safe to relax. You know, people like me who are, well, more sensitive to things. We have to have baths, she told me seriously one night, shuffling closer on my bed. I couldn't possibly spend that long in the shower. It would be far too risky. Grandma stared at me with those blue eyes of hers, unsmiling, and I knew it was time for one of her stories. One of the scary ones. I shivered with pleasure and pulled the covers up to my chin. Why is it a risk, Grandma? She half turned to look out the window, watching me from the corner of her eye, pausing for effect. I waited, feeling my heart rate pick up ever so slightly in my chest. Well, she said after a moment, it's only risky if you close your eyes, of course. If you close your eyes for longer than 10 seconds. What do you mean? Why? Well, do you ever play that game in the playground with your friends? The one where someone turns their back and the others sneak up on them when they're not looking. I nodded and Grandma nodded back. Exactly. So that's what it's like in a shower when you have your eyes closed. That's what it's like with Mr. Longfingers. A cold itch tickled my back. Who's Mr. Longfingers, Grandma? She let out a deep breath, as if she wished she hadn't said anything, turned her head back to face me. When she next spoke, she lowered her voice. No one knows exactly, Grandma whispered. Some think it's a creature that's attracted to the heat and the smell we give off in there, meaning the bathroom. Others think it's a demon that finds its way into our realm through the dense steam clouds. No one can say for sure, because the only ones who have actually seen Mr. Longfingers aren't ever going to be able to tell you. I pulled a breath. Why not? Grandma shuffled closer along the bed and leaned towards me, leaving my question hanging in the air. Don't you worry about it, sweetheart. Don't you worry your pretty head. As long as you remember the rules, you'll be fine. What rules? Well, when you're in the shower, you try not to close your eyes for too long. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 seconds is just about okay too, but any longer than that, yeah, then what? Well, any longer than that and you may just start to feel something in the room with you. Something watching. And if you ever go longer than 15 seconds, that's when you might start to hear a noise too. Hear what? The soft tap, tap, tap of fingers on glass, fingers drumming against the glass door of the shower. If you do ever hear that noise, God forbid, will you make me a promise? What, Grandma? Promise me you'll never open your eyes. I barely slept that night, hardly at all. I closed my eyes to try and relax, but every time I'd imagine a face pressed against my bedroom window staring at me. And when I did finally get to sleep, I had nightmares, bad ones. I had them all week, in fact. Dreams about disembodied eyes watching me in the dark and long fingers reaching out to touch my skin. It wasn't any better when I was awake either, not really. The shower was the worst. That's when Grandma's story really got me. I'd never thought about it before, but suddenly I had trouble shutting my eyes in there. I'd been standing beneath the beating water, shampoo running down my face, and as soon as I squinted my eyelids closed, I'd hear Grandma's words running through my head. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 seconds is okay, but any longer than that. I'd rub my hair fast, feeling shampoo dripping off my chin, and as soon as I counted past 5 seconds, I'd feel it. A sort of pressure. Not a feeling of being watched exactly, but something close to that. I'd run my fingers faster and faster through my hair, frantically trying to get the suds out, and the ready blackness behind my closed eyes, coupled with the rush of the water in my ears, would feel like a held breath, like the silence before a scream. The seconds would race through my mind, and I'd be so desperate to open my eyes again that I'd sometimes do it before my hair was rinsed fully clean, and my eyes would sting with shampoo. But before I shut them again, I'd always be sure to peer out through the steamed glass door of the shower cubicle, just to make sure I was there alone. It wasn't long before Mum realised something was up. She heard me crying out in my sleep at night and came in to comfort me, asked me what was the matter, and it all came out. I told her about Grandma's story and about Mr. Longfingers, and she got this look on her face when I was telling her, like she used to get when I'd made her really mad. This wide-eyed, angry look. Only this time, she wasn't angry with me. She was angry with Grandma. My parents' room was next to mine, and sometimes if I pressed my ear against the wall, I could hear them talking in there. Soft whispers. That night, though, after my mum was satisfied I wasn't scared anymore, she'd gone back to her room, and the whisperings weren't soft at all. Oh no. I heard Mum hissing at my dad about Grandma, about the stories she told me. My mum's voice floated through the wall, sharp and crisp. You know what your fucking mother said to him now, don't you, Simon? Dad's response was an unintelligible mutter. She's told him there's a monster that will get him if he shuts his eyes in the shower. A monster. The poor kid's been having nightmares about it all week. Seriously, Simon, you better say something to her tomorrow morning, first thing, or I will. Grandma came to visit me in my room the following night. That time, as she perched on the end of my bed, there were no stories. Nothing like that. Grandma just sat there and stared down at me, her blue eyes wide and sad, and the light from the moon outside my window lit up her wrinkled face. You know I'd never let anything bad happen to you, don't you? She said after a moment. I nodded my head. I know, Grandma. You know I wouldn't let any harm come to you. I nodded again. Okay, good. That's good. She looked away from me for a moment and out the window. You know, the things I tell you in the evening are meant to help you, sweetheart. They're meant to toughen you up a bit and protect you. She paused and shook her head. But maybe your mum's right. Maybe I went too far this time. She looked down at me and smiled, but even then, even though I was only 10 years old, I could tell it didn't quite reach her eyes. I tell you what, Grandma said. You know what I told you about Mr. Longfingers and the shower? Well, I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'll scare the bastard off. How about that? It won't come back in a hurry if it has to face me. I stared up at Grandma, watching her face glow in the moonlight, watching her smile down at me. I nodded my head once. I was the one who found her. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I guess it had been about a week after the talk in my room. A week after she told me she wouldn't let anything harm me. I woke up early that morning from a bad dream to a heavy thumping sound. I sat bolt upright in bed, my room quiet around me, and I couldn't hear anything from the wall that joined my parents' room either. But the house wasn't entirely silent. Floating down the hallway, muffled by my closed door, I could hear the sound of rushing water, the noise of the shower. I leapt out of bed and ran down the upstairs hallway, heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I reached the closed bathroom door, I started banging on it. A deep terror was welling up inside me, like cold water from a well, something I couldn't place. And I kept banging and shouting, Grandma! over and over again, even though she didn't respond. Off to my right, I was aware of dim voices from my parents' room, the sleepy shuffle of footsteps, but before they had the chance to make it out onto the landing, I lifted my hand to test out the door handle, more out of instinct than because I thought it might actually open. But the door wasn't locked. I kept banging with my free hand and it swung inwards, bringing me face to face with a wall of steam. Heat struck my skin. I squinted my eyes against the damp fog and peered into the bathroom. And before Dad pushed me to one side, before everything around me descended into shouting and tears and chaos, I saw her. I saw Grandma. She was laying naked on the floor in the shower cubicle, the water beating down around her, blue eyes bulging from her face, and one hand was curled against her chest like a dead bird, while the other tailed against the glass of the shower cubicle. The flailing finger marks she'd carved through the steam, still clear and fresh. It was a heart attack that killed her. That's what my dad told me. He said Grandma was old and the thing had struck her quickly and suddenly. She would have died fast and without pain, Dad said. She wouldn't have suffered. I knew better though. Even as a 10-year-old, I knew better. And years later, writing this as an adult, I still know better. I also know my wife and kids resent me for refusing to shower in the house, for insisting everyone take baths. They pretend it's okay and they humour me, but I can tell they don't actually understand it. Not at all. My wife thinks she does. She thinks I still carry the trauma of seeing my grandmother dying in front of me when I was little. I guess she's right in a way. But she doesn't know the full truth. Nobody does. And no one would believe me even if I told them. No one would believe me if I said the reason I don't take showers, the reason I haven't had one since I was 10 years old, isn't because I'm scared of the sight of a dead body. It's because all those years ago, when I crept back into the still hot bathroom after the paramedics had taken Grandma's body downstairs, I made sure to check the marks her fingers had carved through the steamed glass of the shower cubicle. And those marks weren't just on the inside. That is such a cool story. I loved that story so much. And one thing that really creeps me out about the story is I actually kind of resonate with it a little bit. As much as I hate to admit this and say this out loud, there was probably about 10 years ago, there was a time where I felt like something, every time I was in the shower, I felt like there was a presence stood outside of it. And when you're younger, I think you live in your ego a lot more. And I think that we are always spiritually open for things to attach to us, negative things to attach to us. That's why I'm so big on protection. I bang on about it in every single episode. But at that point, I didn't know about protection. I didn't know what words to say. I just wasn't into it. Too young, too in my ego, too caring about being out with mates and all that kind of stuff. So I had this period where I felt like something would watch me when I was in the shower. And I even felt like I saw it in my mind's eye, what it was. And there was one night. So my mum had moved in with her boyfriend at the time. I moved back home because she was there for about 6 years. So me and my sister and one of my best friends, Rosie, ended up renting my mum's house off of her, basically. I think Rosie was out, but my sister was in the living room. It's just 3 young girls living in this house, all in their 20s, all nuts. And I was in the shower. And I just remember putting shampoo in my hair. And the same as Christopher's story, like almost feeling too scared to shut my eyes for too long, just intuitively just scared of doing it. So I was just like trying to rinse like all the shampoo in my hair, but it was still like kind of dripping down my face. And in that moment, in my mind, I said to myself, what if the bathroom light turns off? And I'm not kidding you. I swear on everything, this is the truth. The light went off. You have not seen someone butt naked move so fast in your damn life. I had shampoo down my face, burning my eyeballs. We got a shower door, like it's like quite a big shower. It's like a 2-person shower. But I flung the door back, jumped out, managed to grab the towel in the dark, throw it around me, opened the door and bolted out into the living room. My sister was like, what are you doing? And I was like, the fucking light's just gone off in there. To this day, it has never happened to anyone. It never happened before that day, and it's never happened since. I thought it might be an electrical fault because, you know, you can get rats in the loft, can't you, chewing through wires or whatever. It's never happened again. We've got spotlights in that bathroom. I think one of them over the last one, Mum hasn't had them replaced in like 10 years, I don't think. One of them is now gone just because it just needs like wiring up again, I guess. But all of them went out. The whole thing. Like, I didn't even tell my mum to come around and look at it to try and fix it. It just worked again. It just never happened again. And eventually, at 26, I joined this like circle. I had this amazing teacher called Jane, such a lovely person. She taught me loads of things about like the spiritual realm, like what you just don't mess with it, you know, and you always like, she said it's not about love and light. She was like, that's kind of a little bit whimsical. She was like, yes, it is about love, but she says, you know, there's a lot of darkness and a lot of things out there you need to protect yourself from. That's why with tarot reading and stuff like that, when people get into it, they think, oh, it's great, I can give someone a reading, but they're not doing protection enough. They're not like protecting with intention the person who they're reading for. They're not setting the intention of who they're actually bringing through. So it opens a gateway and a portal. And I've just learned how serious that stuff is. But I learned basically how to protect myself. And I think that's why it never happened again. Even the other day, I thought about this, which is really crazy why I found this story now, because it's all kind of aligning. I thought about that, and I thought about not being able to feel that presence anymore. And I envisioned how I felt back then, seeing it in one particular panel of the shower. It was always like front on, the panel like right in front of you. So as I was stood there, it would be like facing me. I always felt like it was there, and I don't feel like it's there anymore, but I envisioned what it looked like, and it freaked me out. And I thought, oh God, like, please don't go out again. I can't handle that now. I couldn't even handle it then. It's weird, isn't it, how things come full circle? But when I read the story, I thought, oh God, was it Mr. Longfingers? Is that what I've been sensing all those years ago? And yeah, now when I have a shower at my mum's, that's what I can think about. I just hope it never happens again. Anyway, this person has sent a second story, so let's get into that one. This one is the one that's it sounds a little bit far-fetched, yeah, but just think, if this is true, this is crazy. And this grandma, next level protection vibes. Not sure I fully agree with her, but I think she had the best intentions for her grandson. But let's read the second. Now, Christopher says, it's starting to come back to me. Slowly, bit by bit. I don't know if it was opening up about my grandma and the other bedtime story that I did, or the fact my wife finally persuaded me to try counselling. But whatever the reason, the memories are returning. Memories from my childhood, memories of my grandma, and memories of the stories she used to tell me before I went to sleep. See, I always knew there were other tales that scared me when I was little. But the time before I was a teenager is like a dark landscape. Only a few small patches are lit up. It's getting clearer now. The shadows that litter that black land are finally being forced to retreat. The thing is, I'm not sure I want to see what they've been hiding. I must have been around 7 years old when Grandma told me about the special knock. I was tucked up in bed at my parents' first house in my little room at the back at the time, and Grandma was perched by my feet. I'd been crying. I don't know what had upset me, but I remember my eyes blurring and my nose running. I remember probing a cut on my lip, touching it over and over again with my tongue. I remember the frown on Grandma's face, a look that was half concern, half something else. After she grabbed a tissue for me and wiped my face, she got up and walked away from the bed and wandered over to the cupboard on the opposite side of the room. I remember that cupboard well. Before we moved to our second home, that cupboard was the source of many sleepless nights for me, many nightmares. I used to imagine all sorts of things about it. I'd lie awake, sometimes for hours, and I'd have to keep peeking my eyes open to check the cupboard door was still closed, to make sure it was shut tight. See, whenever my eyes were closed and I heard a creak somewhere in the house, I'd imagine it was that cupboard door, that something on the far side was trying to open it ever so softly, so it could come and get me while I slept. I'd never told anyone about this fear. Even at 7 years old, I knew it was stupid. Baby stuff. But as I watched my grandma stop in front of the cupboard and lean her wrinkled cheek against the wood, I felt myself growing tense all the same. Even though the lights were on, even though there was an adult in the room with me, and when Grandma closed her eyes and started whispering, I had to fight back the urge to shout for my parents. Grandma, I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Grandma, what are you doing? For a few more seconds, she didn't respond. She just kept her eyes closed and kept muttering. Then abruptly, she turned to face me again and smiled. And when she came back and resumed her usual position at the foot of my bed, I knew it was story time. Did I ever tell you about the special knock, sweetheart? I shook my head. No. Well, maybe I was waiting until you were a bit older. The special knock can be wonderful. It can lead you to see things you wouldn't even be able to conjure up in your dreams. But it can also be, well, dangerous. Grandma glanced away from me towards the bedroom door. Maybe it's for another time, in fact. I really should be getting home to see your grandfather, and I don't want to scare you. She started to get up from the bed, but I stopped her. No, don't go, Grandma. What's this special knock? Grandma's blue eyes twinkled. She hovered where she was for a moment, then sat back down. The special knock is an old trick a friend taught me when I was younger, she began. Not everyone can do it, and not everyone would want to do it. You have to be brave and careful and, well, special. Grandma smiled at me, like you. As I watched her, she reached into the front pocket of her cardigan and pulled out 2 boiled sweets and passed one to me. I'd already brushed my teeth, and I knew my mum would kill me if she caught me eating sweets before bed. But this was my time alone with Grandma. Mum was downstairs with Dad. She'd never know. I unwrapped the sweet and popped it in my mouth, feeling the sticky mint wash over my tongue. The cut in my lip stung slightly, but I ignored it. When Grandma next spoke, she lowered her voice. When I was over by your cupboard door just now, I was using magic words. Secret words that only a few other people know. Do you know what those words do? I shook my head. They turn a door into a window, a sort of gateway. The thing is, sweetheart, this place you spend your days in, this house you live in, and the building you go to school in, and the town you visit with your mother at the weekends, it's not the only place. There are other places too. And if you use the special knock on that cupboard door of yours, now that I've whispered these magic words into it, you'll see them. You'll be able to see those other places for yourself. I stared at Grandma, concentrating on her words, absorbing them, mint flooding my mouth, but I forgot to swallow. Now listen to me very carefully, Grandma continued, because this is the important bit. The way you open the window is by doing the special knock, but you have to get it right. 7 knocks on the door, that's what you'll want. 7 knocks, no more, no less. Then you open it. You won't be able to step through it, but you'll have one heck of a view, all right. I swallowed. A view of what? I don't know its name, but the woman who taught me the special knock had her own name for it. She called it the lunar plane. 7 knocks takes you to the lunar plane. I could try and describe it to you, sweetheart, but honestly, I don't think I could do it justice. You just have to see it for yourself. All I can say is it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, and trust me, I've seen plenty. Grandma plucked the sweet wrappers from the duvet and put them in her pocket. She put her hands on her legs, as if bracing herself to stand, and then paused. How many knocks did I say? 7, Grandma. That's right, 7. Don't forget either. If you get the wrong number and then open the door, she glanced across the cupboard and frowned. Well, just make sure you don't get the wrong number, okay? Okay, Grandma. And will you make me a promise? What? If you do somehow knock the wrong number of times, especially if that number happens to be 13 or something close to it, then whatever you do, don't open the door. Okay? Don't open it. No matter what you hear on the other side, the last thing you want is to open a gateway to the Blacklands. I felt icy fingers down my back. I glanced across at the closed cupboard door in the shadows at the far end of my bedroom. What's the Blacklands? Grandma stood up and wandered over to me, leaned down and gave me a kiss. You don't want to know, she whispered. I spent the next week avoiding that cupboard. I didn't go anywhere near it. I didn't even look in its direction. I did my best just to push Grandma's story as far out my head as I could. It wasn't easy. Whenever I was alone in my room and the house was silent, I'd feel it. A sort of pull. Like someone tells you not to look at something and all of a sudden you want to take a quick peek. The feeling was sort of like that, but it was different too, stronger. Sometimes when I was laying in bed, I'd feel the cupboard almost like a weight in my mind, a heavy static energy. It made me restless, made me want to scrunch up my fists and grit my teeth. When I turned away from the cupboard, my skin itched like the paws had tiny invisible bugs in them. It made it hard for me to sleep. And when I did sleep, I had dreams. Sometimes the dreams were pleasant, floaty ones. I'd dream I was on a cloud, hovering through the multicoloured planes of light, flying through an endless sea of stars, and I'd wake up from these dreams feeling happy, safe, like how I felt when my mum hugged me and stroked my hair. But other times, I had nightmares. The nightmares I had during that week were the worst I ever remembered having in my life. Horrible, half-glimpsed blurs, images I'd wake up from like a scream lodged in my throat, my sweat-soaked pajamas sticking to my skin and my back. At the time, I didn't remember the nightmares themselves, at least not completely, but every time I woke up from one, I was left with the same fading image. An image of myself surrounded by thick, choking blackness, dense shadows everywhere. I couldn't see a thing, but I had the sense that I was standing at the centre of a vast open space. Wind howled around me, sounds echoed, and I wanted to open my mouth and yell for help, but I couldn't bring myself to, because I knew I wasn't alone. It was a week after Grandma's story that I used the special knock. It was a Saturday night, and my friend from school, Tim Jacobs, was round. We were having a sleepover. It had been a long, long time since I saw Tim, but I can still picture him. Even though he was a month younger than me, I always remember him looking older, a tall, broad-shouldered kid with green eyes and messy blonde hair, a half smirk permanently on his face. Tim was one of the most popular kids in our year, and in normal circumstances, he wouldn't have had anything to do with me. But our dads were friends from way back, and we'd known each other our whole lives. As Tim often liked to remind the kids at school, he was forced to hang out with me. When are you going to get a TV in your room or a computer? Tim sat in his pajamas, slumped in the chair by my desk. He fiddled with my desk lamp, switching it on and off. His face lit up with light and then disappeared, then lit up again. This wasn't the first time Tim had asked me a question like this. Whenever we had sleepovers at my house, he spent the whole time moaning about my lack of stuff. No TV, no computer, no PlayStation. I had board games and I had books, but that was about it. And Tim had no interest in those things. You know my mum won't let me, I muttered back. It was 10 p.m. and we were both speaking in half whispers. We'd been told to go to sleep at 9 p.m. My mum had already been up to give us one warning for talking. I learned from past experience that one warning was all you wanted to get. Mum had a short fuse, and she wouldn't go above grounding me if I wasn't careful. I knew we were safe if we kept our voices low. Mum and Dad were both downstairs in the lounge watching TV, some film. Tinny sound of laughter drifted up the stairs every now and then. As long as we weren't too loud, they wouldn't hear us. I glanced warily at Tim, who was now fiddling with the lamp. He was in a restless mood. He'd been silent and sullen most of the evening, rolling his eyes whenever I suggested stuff for us to do. Bad signs. From knowing him so long, I knew he could get reckless when he was bored. Reckless and mean. You know what I think, said Tim, keeping his eyes on a lamp. He was talking slowly and carefully, punctuating his words with a flick of the lamp switch. What I think, switch, light goes on, is that your mum, switch, dark, light goes off, is a bitch, switch, light goes on. He put extra emphasis on bitch, savouring the bad word, the adultness of it. Then he stared across the room at me, fixing his green eyes on mine. I felt my own eyes prickle, and suddenly had to fight to hold back tears. I looked away from Tim, and my eyes found the cupboard. I know what we can do, I said suddenly. Tim followed my gaze. I'm not playing any more of your stupid board games, he said. That's kids stuff. No, this isn't board games. This is my secret. I caught myself. A secret someone showed me. Yeah? What secret? Tim's voice still had an edge to it, but at the same time I could tell I'd caught his interest. This was my best tool when Tim was in a mood. Distraction. If I argued or disagreed with him, he'd only make fun of me more. But if I could get his mind on something else, I might be okay. So basically there's this special knock that someone taught me. If I do a special knock on the cupboard door, then open it, we'll be able to see something really cool. Tim rolled his eyes. Yeah, right. No, really. A witch taught me how to do it. She cast a spell on the door, and now I can take us anywhere we want to go just by knocking on it. Tim stood up from the chair by my desk. The lamplight spilled over his face. His expression was half smirk, half scowl. That's the dumbest thing I have ever heard, he said. It's dumb even for you. How about instead of knocking on the door, I just knock on your head a bunch of times? How about that? He took a step towards me and I panicked. Well, if you're too scared to try, I'll understand. That was a big risk, and I knew it. But as soon as the words were out, Tim paused. Why the hell would I be scared? I'm not scared of anything. I shrugged. Well, the spell the witch did is dangerous. Really dangerous. Like, if we get the number of knocks wrong and I do more than I should, we could go someplace bad. Tim glanced across the cupboard and then looked back at me, his face hard to read. Wait, so how many knocks is it meant to be then? 7, I said quickly. 7 takes us to this awesome place, but the witch told me that if we get the knocks wrong, especially if we get close to 13 or something like that, then the door opens someplace different, someplace scary. Tim was no longer scowling. He looked across the cupboard door again, a slight frown on his face. After a few more seconds, he shrugged his shoulders. Okay then, go on, let's try it. The brief wave of relief I felt was extinguished as soon as I turned to the cupboard door. It stood a few feet away from me, just outside the glow of the desk lamp, in the shadows. It seemed stupid to think the cupboard wasn't any more than just a cupboard. Baby stuff. But then again, as I looked at it, I remembered the dreams I'd been having all week, the nightmares, and Grandma's words from the previous weekend floated back to me. If you get the wrong number, and then open the door. Grandma hadn't had her storytelling face on when she warned me about getting the number wrong. She'd had a serious face on. I was sure of it, as though she really meant what she was saying. And what was it she said about 13 knocks? If you do somehow knock the wrong number of times, especially if that number happens to be 13 or something close to it, then whatever you do, don't open the door, okay? Don't open it, no matter what you hear on the other side. I shivered, still. That was right, wasn't it? I'd just have to make sure I only knocked 7 times. I'd count as I went, easy peasy. I pulled in a deep breath and stepped towards the cupboard. I felt Tim's eyes on me. From downstairs, at the edge of my hearing, I caught laughter floating up from the lounge. It's okay, I told myself. Your parents are just downstairs, and besides, nothing's really going to happen, is it? Grandma can't really turn doors magic. Get on with it, said Tim. If you're going to do your special needs knock or whatever the hell it is, then just do it, okay? Don't just stand there. I ignored him. By now I was directly in front of the cupboard door. I could feel the tingle again too. The pressure beneath my pajamas, my skin was all goosebumps. It might only have been a slight chill in my room and nothing more than that. But then again, I knew it was more than that. I could feel in my mind a heaviness that was like the start of a headache. A pull behind my eyes. As I reached up and made my right hand into a fist, it felt like I was no longer in control of my body. Knock. I struck the wood with my fist softly. The sound was dull and hollow. Knock. I felt Tim at the edge of my vision moving up beside me. Knock. Somewhere in the distance I heard a faint sound. Knock. At first I thought it was a noise from the TV downstairs, but knock. Then I thought it might be coming from outside my bedroom window, and knock. Then it sounded as though it was all around me, and knock. Finally, as my fist struck the door for the 7th time, I realised what the sound was. It was a whistle, a faint low hum coming from inside the cupboard. The echo of my final knock faded, melting into the noise beyond the door. My skin tingled. I stepped forwards, almost in a trance, my hand reaching for the doorknob. Then I felt myself shoved to one side as Tim pushed past me. Bang, 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 bang. Before I had the chance to stop him or even so much as call out, Tim had thumped his fist against the door 6 more times, making the total number of knocks 13. Beyond the cupboard, the whistling sound stopped. Tim reached out and gripped the doorknob. Don't! My words were only half whispered, but something in my voice made Tim pause. Still clutching the doorknob, he turned to look at me, and the grin on his face grew wider as he saw the fear in mine. When he spoke next, his voice was a parody of shock and concern. "Oh no, did I get the special needs knock wrong? Did I make it all scary for poor little Christopher?" Tim pouted out his lower lip. "Is little Christopher scared of big bad monsters in the cupboard?" I listened for a whistling noise beyond the door, for any noise beyond the door, but could no longer hear anything. "Don't open it, Tim. I'm serious." "Oh, you're serious, are you? Oh, okay. I didn't realise how serious you were. I wouldn't want you telling your mummy on me." Tim took his hand away from the door and rolled his eyes. He turned away. I felt my body begin to untense, but just as I was turning away too, Tim spun back around and grabbed the doorknob. Terror rolled through me in a sick wave. I turned just in time to see the cupboard door flying open. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound died in my throat when I saw what was on the other side. Nothing. Nothing at all. Just some clothes hanging up and some toys littering the floor. The exact same view I had had when I opened the cupboard. Nothing else. "Oh wow, the look on your face." I turned to see Tim with his hands on his knees, his body shaking with laughter. "You look like you were going to wet yourself. Oh, Chris, the guys at school are going to love this." I felt my cheeks burning. I turned away from Tim and stared into the shadows of the cupboard. I told myself Tim would be gone in the morning anyway. I turned away from the cupboard and walked back across my room towards my single bed. "Where you going?" "To sleep." "Oh, what's wrong, Christopher? Did your special needs cupboard not work?" "Shut up." I was halfway across the room by that point, but when the cupboard door slammed shut behind me, I jumped. I looked back and saw Tim standing in front of it, staring at me, no longer laughing. "What did you just say?" "Just leave me alone, Tim. I'm going to sleep. And you should as well. If you keep banging around, Mum's going to hear you and we're both going to get grounded." Tim's frown deepened for a moment and then faded. He glanced towards the bedroom door. As he paused to listen, I knew he could hear what I heard, footsteps on the stairs. The TV had gone off and my parents were getting ready for bed. Tim looked back at me and shrugged. But when he next spoke, he lowered his voice. "Whatever. I'm bored anyway. There's never anything to do around here." He made his way over to his sleeping bag, which was set up near the bedroom door. I walked over to my desk to switch the lamp off, then made my way to my own bed. I suddenly felt exhausted, and as I clambered under the covers, I heard Tim's voice, a soft hiss in the darkness. "Night, night, Christopher. Don't let the cupboard monsters bite." His laughter followed me into an uneasy sleep. It was a noise that woke me, a soft tapping like fingertips drumming on wood. I had a vision of Tim at my desk, tapping his fingers against the surface as he switched the lamp on and off. But when I creaked my eyes open, the room was still dark, and my desk chair was empty. Tap, 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 tap. I hadn't dreamt it. The sound was still there, constant and steady. Tap, 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 tap. Coming from the far side of the bedroom, dread surged through my chest and my stomach, forcing me fully awake. I lifted my head from my pillow slowly and peered into the shadows. Tim was standing in front of the cupboard, his back facing towards me, blonde hair sticking up in clumps, still messy from sleep. As I watched, he took a step closer to it, then another. Finally, he began to reach out a hand, as if in slow motion, for the cupboard's doorknob. "Tim," I spoke in a low hiss. "Tim, what are you doing?" He didn't react. He just kept reaching his hand out, his fingertips now inches from the door. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was growing louder, more insistent. It was coming from the cupboard, and as I kicked back the duvet and swung my legs out, Grandma's words raced through my mind. "Whatever you do, don't open the door. Don't open it, no matter what you hear on the other side." "Tim!" I hissed his name again as my feet hit the carpet. He didn't react. From the way he was moving, I had the idea he might still be unconscious. Either that or in some kind of trance. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Louder still, as I hurried across the room, Tim's fingertips found the doorknob. The tapping sound stopped. I skidded to a stop, a few feet away from where he stood, terror rooting me in place. "Tim, don't!" He stirred. I saw his head move, turning slightly towards me. I caught a glimpse of one green eye, open but glazed. Then Tim tugged the door open. The hinges squealed as it moved. Tim hadn't put much force behind his pull, so the door creaked open slowly, and it didn't open all the way, only about a foot. But that was enough. It was enough for me to glimpse the swirling, ink-thick blackness beyond, a darkness that was far too dense to be explained with shadows. It was enough for me to hear the distant howling, like the storm wind battering the eaves of a dilapidated house. And it was enough for me to feel a sense of dread that was way worse than anything I'd ever felt in my life. Tim, wake up! My voice wasn't any louder, but this time it seemed to get through. Tim let go of the doorknob. He turned towards me and I saw him blink rapidly, saw the glazed look leave his face, and then long fingers stretched from the cupboard and found his throat. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I could only stare on in shock as the fingers wrapped themselves around his neck. Tim tried to speak, but he couldn't. He could only make the same strangled noise, like a baby struggling to make itself understood. I listened to the noise in horror, still rooted to the spot. Tim was moving impossibly slow. I didn't know how long I'd stood there, frozen in place on the carpet. I only knew it was long enough. Long enough for me to get a clear view of those fingers, which were like a cross between tree branches and tentacles, tightening around Tim's throat. Long enough for me to see his strained face turning from red to purple, to watch his veins as his forehead stood out like worms beneath the skin. Long enough for me to see him stretching out a hand towards me, the fingers flailing in my direction while the terror grew on his face. That was what finally snatched me out of my shock. Tim's hand. Something about seeing Tim, a kid who had dominated playgrounds and sports fields for as long as I'd known him, reaching out towards me with desperation in his eyes. Without pausing to think what I was doing, I ran towards him and grabbed him. I grabbed his hand. Just for a second, I felt his grip tightening on mine. Wind howled in the distance and my eyes locked on Tim's. And then, with the force of a plaster being ripped off a cut, Tim was snatched backwards. 1 minute he was holding my hand and the next he'd vanished. I had a brief impression of him flying through the air and screaming as he was pulled through the dark gap in my cupboard door. Then he was gone, his cries swallowed by the distant wind. I stared down at my empty hand, too many emotions raging through me to process, and only looked up when I heard the crash of the cupboard door banging shut. By the time I heard footsteps and voices on the landing beyond my room, I'd started to cry. Tim was never seen again. Gone without a trace. And when my parents came into my bedroom that night, they thought it was all a game. Hide and seek got out of hand. I kept telling them Tim was in the cupboard, but whenever my dad opened it to check, he wouldn't find anything, just the same old pile of clothes and toys. Later, when the police came, I told them the same thing I'd eventually told my parents, that I'd seen something grab Tim and pull him into the cupboard, a hand that came out of the darkness and wrapped itself around his neck. No one believed me, and why would they? And looking back, I can see myself through their eyes, just an upset, terrified little kid whose friend had gone missing. Maybe they thought I'd had a nightmare, or maybe they thought I'd seen something, an abductor pulling Tim through the window perhaps, but my frightened mind had simply confused the details. Either way, whenever I mentioned the cupboard, they dismissed it. There was only one person who didn't. We were already in our new home when I next saw Grandma, our second one, a few towns over. At the time, I hadn't really understood why we were moving. I'd overheard Dad telling Mum the talking would never stop if we didn't leave, but I hadn't really got what he meant. I didn't care though. Moving meant I got to go to a new school to get away from all the whispering kids in the playground. It also meant I'd never have to see Tim's mum, who turned up outside the school gates one day screaming questions at me. But mostly it meant I could get away from the cupboard. It meant I could sleep. My parents had eventually set me up a bed in the spare room and I refused to step back in my own bedroom. But even then, that hadn't helped, not really, because I still knew it was in there. I could still feel it. The thought of that cupboard was like a horrible itch in my mind I kept wanting to scratch at, but that only made it worse. Moving house got it far away from me once and for all. And a couple of weeks after we moved, I finally saw Grandma. I've been asking my mum and dad if I could see her ever since that night Tim disappeared, but they kept putting me off. Said it wasn't the right time and I could see Grandma once everything had settled. But finally, after our furniture was moved in and they grew fed up of me pestering, I got my wish. Grandma came round for the evening and at bedtime I asked if she could come tuck me in. She agreed. The second the door to my new room was shut, I started babbling. Telling her about the cupboard door, the special knock, and about how we did 13 times and all about Tim. She listened at first, But as I grew more and more worked up, she finally came over and started stroking my hair. Shh, sweetheart, Grandma whispered. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Shh, you're safe. But can the thing in the cupboard find me here? What? No, you don't need to worry about anything in the cupboard. The magic words only work once, and I don't have to use them again if you don't want me to. I meant you're safe from him. From who? From the boy that was bullying you, sweetheart. From Timothy. Grandma smiled and stroked my cheek. Your little friend is in the Blacklands now. The temperature in my room was warm, but my skin suddenly felt cold. I stared up at Grandma. What do you mean? She sighed. Don't you remember when I last came to see you and tucked you in? You'd been crying. You'd cut your lip. And before I told you about the special knock, you told me your friend, a boy called Timothy, had tripped you up in the playground. You said he did it in front of girls in your class and they'd all laughed at you. I stared at Grandma and thought back to the last time I'd seen her. I remembered the feeling of having cried recently and remembered the cut on my lip. I remembered probing at it with my tongue while Grandma spoke, but I couldn't remember telling her about Tim tripping me. I grasped for the right words and came up short. Tim's my friend, Grandma. Well, I'll tell you something for free, sweetheart. Anyone who hurts you to make themselves feel bigger is not your friend. Grandma frowned for a second and then smiled again. But like I said, you don't need to worry about him anymore. Timothy's in the Blacklands now, and he'll never get out. Grandma leaned towards me. Her breath smelled like sweets and mint. I can't have anyone hurting my Christopher, can I? Now give your grandma a big kiss and say thank you. She leaned closer to me, and there were so many questions and emotions swirling through my head. It felt like it was going to burst. I almost flinched away from my grandma, but I stopped myself at the last minute. As her face came closer to mine, instinct kicked in. Thank you, Grandma, I mumbled, giving her a kiss on the cheek. You're welcome, Christopher, she said. What on earth is going on here? Like, this story is crazy far-fetched, isn't it? It sounds like massively far-fetched. There's a little boy that's disappeared here. Yes, he sounds like a total arsehole. But still, we don't want kids to disappear into the Blacklands. I understand protecting your children. I do understand that. I also don't want to mess with any black magic or piss anyone off. But I think sending a child who has still got life lessons to learn into the Blacklands might be a little bit harsh. Just a bit. You know, that's my 2 pence on that. Now, there is one more story. This has been a really long podcast so far, and I've loved reading this to you. It almost feels like it's been written by someone who is very good at creative writing. And I'm here for that. Now, this third one, Christopher started with a question, and he says, why would you tell a 5-year-old such a fucked up tale? Which I think is brilliant. Now, just a heads up for the story, there is a reference to sexual abuse here. It's not in any detail or anything like that, but just a little heads up for you guys. He says, ever since the story of my 5th birthday came back to me, this is the question I've kept asking myself, but don't have the answer. I suppose I shouldn't be that surprised, given the other stories that my grandma told me when I was little, the one about Mr. Longfingers and the special knock. I shouldn't really be surprised. What follows is a memory of the day I turned 5. I must have been repressing that day for years because it's taken weeks of therapy to unlock it. And it starts like this. Grandma, will you tell me a story before bed? She was halfway through the bedroom door when my words stopped her. I didn't want her to go. Grandma had just tucked me in and turned off my bedside lamp, and suddenly I felt afraid. Partly it was the darkness of my room. The shadows were so thick I could barely make out my stuffed toys sitting in a row on top of my dresser. But mainly it was my new birthday present. The present Grandma had got me. It wasn't my main present. That was a pack of monsters in my pocket toys I'd ripped open downstairs. No, this was an extra present, a secret present. I hated it. Even in the dark, I could see its shadowy outline on my bedside table. This thing gave me the creeps. A story? Well, what kind of story would you like to hear? It was a silly question because Grandma only ever told me one kind of story, the scary kind. But because I was already a bit freaked out, I said something I wouldn't normally have done. Nothing too scary, Grandma. Grandma raised her eyebrow at me. Not too scary. I shook my head. She leaned over and switched my bedside light back on, then perched at the edge of my bed. She smiled down at me, and out of the corner of my eye, I could still see my grandma's present. It was still watching me from the bedside table. I did my best to ignore it. Okay, said Grandma, making herself comfortable. "I think I'll tell you a story about a witch." "Once upon a time," Grandma began, "there was a young woman who lived in a cottage by the sea. She didn't have a care in the world. She went to school and she painted and she read adventure books by the fire in the evening. This girl lived with her mother and her grandmother, and they were all very close. She loved her family very much. One day in the early summer, the girl was coming home from school when she met a boy on the path. She'd never spoken to him before, but she recognised him well enough. He wore the same uniform she did, and after all, she guessed he must be in the year above her at school. "Where are you off to?" said the boy. His shirt was untucked and he was smoking a cigarette. The girl hesitated. Her mother had told her cigarettes were bad, and she was also told never to speak to strangers on her way home from school. But then again, thought the girl, was this boy actually a stranger? The headmaster at school said that they were all one big family. If this boy wore the same uniform as her, they couldn't really be strangers, could they? "I'm going home," answered the girl. "My house is along this path." The boy finished his cigarette and flicked it into the grass. He smiled at the girl. "Before you go home, don't you want to see something cool?" he asked. The girl was curious, but also knew that she couldn't be late. Her mother would worry terribly if she was late, so she thanked the boy and told him that she had to be on her way. But just as she walked past him, he called out again. "It's a puppy," the boy said. "Our dog had a litter of puppies last week, and Dad said I could keep one. It's in the old barn near my house. Don't you want to see the puppy?" Now, the girl loved puppies. She wanted a dog for as long as she could remember, but her mother always said that they couldn't afford one. Right then, she'd given anything in the world to pet a cute puppy. When she closed her eyes, she could picture it, a happy little dog with a pink tongue and a wagging tail. The girl paused and looked down the path that led back to the house. She thought about her mother. Then she looked back at the boy who was smiling at her. Was there really any harm, thought the girl, in taking a quick look? So the girl followed the boy and he led her across a big, big field, and they kept going until the girl saw the large barn towering in the distance. And she was so excited that she walked as fast as she could, and the boy laughed and walked right along with her. The girl only started to feel nervous when they were right outside the barn. It had taken longer to get there than she thought it would, and the sun was a lot lower in the sky now. She was going to be late getting home. Her mother would be worried. She wanted to see the puppy quickly so she could hurry back. But the barn was dark and full of shadows, and she couldn't see any sign of it. "It's just over here at the back," whispered the boy as he took her hand and led her into the shadows. "He's going to be so excited to see you." So the girl took his hand and followed him, and even though his palm was sweaty, she held onto it tight because she was suddenly starting to feel afraid. It was only then that she heard footsteps and laughter from behind her and turned to see two bigger boys emerging from the barn shadows, that the fear inside her turned to terror. When the girl finally got back home, the sun was setting over the ocean and the sea was the colour of blood. The girl made it through the door of the little cottage before she collapsed in a heap in the hallway, crying her eyes out. It was her grandmother who found her like that. Now, the girl's grandma was very old and very wise. Mother used to tell her that grandma had lived so long and had seen so much that she knew all the world's secrets. When she was little, the girl had been frightened of her grandmother. But now the old lady took the young woman in her arms and comforted her, told the girl her mother was working late and she wouldn't be home for a while, told the girl she could tell her anything she wanted, and in the hallway of their little cottage, the girl did. She told her grandmother about the boy and the barn and all the horrible things the bigger boys had done in the shadows, and the grandmother listened and she grew very silent and very still. "Come with me," she said. The girl had hardly ever been in her grandmother's room before. When she was little, it always gave her the creeps. Her grandmother had lots of old scary paintings on the walls and strange little statues and carvings on her shelves. But right then, as her grandmother led her to an old wooden chair and sat her down, the girl had hardly even noticed them. Her grandmother was speaking to her in a soothing voice, and all she could do was listen. She listened as her grandmother told her that there was a special trick she knew. A trick to protect against evil. A trick to protect against those horrible boys so they'd never be able to hurt her again, so that she'd have control of them. As grandmother spoke, she fetched an old wooden box from the bottom of her wardrobe and unlocked it. Inside the box were countless knitted dolls. All of the dolls were the same blank cream colour, with no facial features at all apart from eyes. Every single doll had a pair of eyes that seemed to follow the girl. As grandmother pulled 3 dolls out of the box, she closed her own eyes, began to whisper. The sound made the girl's skin itch, but it didn't last long. Soon, her grandmother had lined up all the dolls on the carpet and her eyes were open again. The last thing she pulled from the box were a pair of black knitting needles and some yarn. "Those boys that hurt you, sweetheart," she whispered. "I want you to describe them to me." And although she was still terrified and although it made her feel sick, the girl did. She described the boys as well as she could remember. She described them as her grandmother went to work with her needles. And finally, with the blood-red sun disappearing below the sea outside the cottage window, the dolls were finished. The girl's grandmother took the girl by the hands and looked into her eyes. "I want you to keep hold of these dolls, sweetheart," she whispered. "As long as you have possession of them, those boys will never be able to hurt you again." And you know what? Those boys never did. The girl was sitting in an armchair overlooking the sea when her grandmother burst through the door of the cottage. It was 2 days after they'd made the dolls, and for the first time since she'd met the boy in the pathway, the girl was feeling calm. She was feeling calm, but her grandmother clearly wasn't. As the girl turned from the window and smiled in greeting, the old woman held a newspaper out in front of the girl with shaking hands. "3 brothers tortured and killed in brutal mass slaying," read the headline. "Agatha," whispered her grandmother. "Oh, Agatha, what did you do?" But the girl just kept smiling. She kept smiling as she took her grandmother by the hand and led her upstairs to the bedroom. She kept smiling as she opened her little cupboard and pulled out the box. And when the old lady cried out in shock and horror as she saw the dolls inside, the girl kept smiling still. "What did you do?" Agatha whispered the grandmother again. But it was pretty obvious what the girl had done. Each of the dolls had been impaled with at least a dozen sewing pins, all of which had been pushed through their knitted heads. The area below each of their waists had been burned black with a flame. The girl smiled at her work and took her grandmother's shaking hands in her own. "They won't be able to hurt anyone now, will they?" she whispered. "You see, sweetheart," said Grandma as she stood up from my bed to switch the light off. "I gave you one with a happy ending." Okay, so we're back in Christopher's world now, just so you know. Christopher says, "I laid in the dark feeling sick. I don't think I understood everything Grandma had told me, not right then at least. I'd understood enough to know I felt worse than I had before the story started." "Grandma, wait," I said, my voice stopping her mid-turn. "Isn't your name Agatha?" Grandma looked back at me and smiled. She walked over and leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. "Time for you to go to sleep, Christopher," she whispered. "And remember, that present I got for you is always there, if you need it." She stood up and left my room. I stared after her, but a few moments later my eyes were pulled back to the gift on my bedside table, the knitted doll. It gazed right back at me, its faceless features, apart from the 2 blank, staring eyes. I mean, this grandma's crazy! These 3 stories have been incredible. The one that's going to scare me in reality is Mr. Longfingers. I will never piss any kind of black magic person off because I don't want to be voodoo dolled. Although I do kind of protect myself against hexes and curses, because you lot might laugh at that. Some of you might not. But I genuinely believe this stuff is real. I genuinely believe it's real. I have watched so much stuff on spiritual warfare and just the energy, like whether you want to admit it or not, like we are energetic beings. Like I've said to you, our energy is everything. And I believe that there are things in this world that try and feed off our energy. And you have to protect yourself against it. But grandma's out here just like being reckless. Like, yes, protect Christopher, but my goodness. I've really enjoyed reading these stories to you. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to them wherever you are, whether that's on a walk, in the car, to work, or wherever you are, laying in bed at night, just chilling. I really love doing these podcasts for you guys. And honestly, I will keep banging them out. I'll keep doing as many as I can, and I'll try and make them as long as I can. It's a bit hard to do the editing, but you know, it's worth it. Now, listen, if you, I hope you've had a brilliant week. Again, if you haven't, just sending you so much love as usual. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know that life is really valuable, and I really hope that you find this space kind of safe for you to come and just switch off and just listen. And I know some of the stories are scary. I get that. Well, they're all meant to be scary, but the way I read them probably isn't that scary, which is fine with me because I'm a pansy. You know what I'm like? I read stories in the daylight on TikTok, so it's fine. But I hope that it gives you the space to just shut off from the world and just feel like you're just in your own little bubble and you can take 5 minutes to breathe. That's why I continue to do this. I mean, some people could just say, well, what, you just read ghost stories. But for me, it goes a bit deeper than that, because I have places that I go, that I switch off to, that I listen to, and I really enjoy it. And I think we all need that, like I've said to you before. So sending you so much love. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. If you've got a ghost story, I'll put my email address below in the description. You can send me your ghost story or your ghost picture, whatever you want to do. Please follow me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you listen the most to your stuff. And I will catch you guys in the next episode. Lots of love. You take care.